Hello there, welcome to Inkquiring Minds. My name is Doug and I'm back with another Pen Resurrection Sunday video. Today's pen, dead on the slab, ready for resurrection, is this 1940 Parker Duofold Vacumatic, what pen collectors call a DuoVac. The original Duofold was discontinued in 1933 when Parker came out with the original Vacumatic Generation 1. But then they resurrected the name Duofold in 1940 and came out with a Vacumatic that was slightly altered from the Vacumatic design. They put the name Duofold on it and they made them from 1940 to 1948 when the Vacumatics were all discontinued. They came in a number of different sizes, this one being a junior. They had a Parker Challenger-like clip, this V-shaped clip with Parker down the center. They had top jewels like the Vacumatics, and they had pointed end finials, and they came in these vertically striped rather than horizontally striped pearlescent celluloid that's semi-translucent so you can see your ink levels through it. This particular Parker DuoVac is dated, looks like the third quarter of 1940. As I said, it has that triangular shaped clip, two small cap bands, and this is in the green pearl celluloid. They came in green, red, and blue. Some rare variations in black. Some of these were button fillers. Most of them, of course, were Vacumatics, hence the DuoVac moniker. This one is a speedline filler, so the blind cap is very long, and this is very unusual. This is like the second generation of the Vacumatics after the lockdown and before the celluloid rod. But I've never seen a speedline filler that says, to fill, pump 9 times, pause between strokes. Well, that's good advice for anyone. Pause between your strokes.
That's what she said.
That reminds me of an old radio joke. Why did the radio announcer have such small hands? We pause for station identification. Sorry.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
There is a light imprint on this one, Parker Duofold, and then it says made in the USA, and then the date code 0 with a dot right there. And we turn the barrel over. This one is imprinted with a name. It says Anne Gleckner right there. And I've done a little bit of research on Anne Gleckner to try to see who the original owner of this pen might be. And I've discovered an Anne Louise Nygaard, but she was born in Williamsport, Pennsylvania in 1922. Now this pen I bought on eBay, and it was sold out of Turbotville, Pennsylvania, which is just 25 minutes away from Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And Anne Louise Nygaard was Anne Louise Gleckner. She passed away in 2012, and when this pen was brand new, she would have been 18 when she graduated high school and started college in Williamsport. Just 3 years later, she met her husband, who was an officer in the Army, and they married and traveled all around the world and eventually settled and retired in Montana. But she's got family all over the place, including in Pennsylvania. So this is a really good guess, I think, that this pen was originally Anne Louise Gleckner's pen from 1940 when she was 18 years old, maybe as a gift when she graduated high school, and went on to Williamsport Junior College where she studied home economics. It's not a stretch to figure that this was Anne's pen. Let's take off the cap and take a look at the nib. It's in really dismal shape in terms of its looks, but that's just old ink and tarnish. See if we can see an imprint on here. And it says Parker pen, made in USA, and there might be a date code there. I can't see it. It's too corroded and full of ink down below there, but we'll get that nib out. And there's the ebonite feed, again crusted with old ink. I love when I get pens like this because they're just ripe for restoration. And this striped celluloid looks rather cloudy and dull right now, but it will polish up beautifully. And Anne's name here was originally filled with gold. I don't know whether it's just gold paint or whether it was real gold, but it's come off in most places. When I polish this pen, all of that gold fill will come off and fade that name a little bit, but I'm not interested in removing Anne's heritage from this fountain pen. So the first thing we have to do is take these parts apart put them in the ultrasonic bath of pen flush, which is 9 parts distilled water and 1 part ammonia, and let them sit for 2 to 3 minutes and agitate and get as much of that old ink out of there as possible. Then we'll see about getting that section off, getting that nib and feed out, and seeing whether we can release that Vacumatic pump and replace the diaphragm, which is obviously missing from this pen. Very tough to push. The spring still works, but there's old gack left inside that pen. And we'll also have to see if we can get that top jewel off and get that clip off to be able to polish up that barrel. So into the bath with everything, and then we'll go from there. So here we are out of the bath. You can see that the nib looks better already with all that old ink off of there. That's just 2-3 minutes in the ultrasonic bath without any rubbing or polishing at all. So let's see whether we can get this section off first without any heat. Gripper material here. It doesn't want to come, so it's probably, there was a lot of ink inside the cap, so I think this has been left for a long time with ink in it. These sections are screwed into the barrel, but they're not glued into the barrel. That will just be old ink. Let's get some heat on it. There we go. Yeah, it's starting to budge. Just old ink. There. And there's the breather tube. There's the section. Lots of old ink. That'll go back in the bath. And I'll rinse that barrel out and put it back in the bath for 2 to 3 minutes as well. And then we'll inspect it with our inspection camera. And here they are out of the bath. And chunks of old diaphragm are dropping out of the barrel here. There's another one and another one. Looks like all of it is coming out here. Some of this debris out before I go in with my inspection camera. And we're already looking rather translucent. Look at that. Let's use that to identify where the remaining pieces are. There we go. There's another big piece right there. Well, I got most of them out anyway. That's looking pretty good. Look at that. And I can just see, even without the inspection camera, because it's so translucent. Let's put it down here so I can push on it. You can see that pump is looking in good shape, and all that's remaining down inside there is the pellet inside the pellet retainer, which in the Speedline fillers was made of aluminum. In the 3rd generation Vacumatics, they changed that to ebonite. So we'll put that aside for now and take a look at the nib. And let's take this breather tube out of here. Look at that feed is all the way extended. Look at that. So that feeds very deep in that pen. Let's take the breather tube out. Just wanting to be stubborn. There we go. Again, some really old ink in there. And I think I'm going to soak this a little bit more before I try to knock that feed out of there. So let's take the nib and put it in the block and see whether we can knock it out. It does not want to budge, so I'm going to let it soak for quite a while. So while we're waiting for the section to soak, let's put the vac pump on the vac extractor, tighten that down, and see whether we can get this loose without any heat. And that's a big no. So out comes the heat gun, and let's give the barrel some heat. It might have budged a bit. Sometimes it's like it slips on the collet, but that's definitely coming out of there. There we go. Unlike the 3rd generation fillers, this one just slips right off. So let's take the collet off the pump. And then take a rod and push that pump the rest of the way out. Be careful not to crack the celluloid. Might have to use my knockout block just to tap it gently from the top. There we go. Just have to get it past that lip. And there's the pump. So there, it goes together like that. And the spring is on the inside of that filler. So there's the pellet retainer, and there's the pellet still in there. So I have to get my tiny drill out and drill out that little celluloid pellet so we can get a new diaphragm. And I just want to show you on the inside there, the remains of some of that diaphragm right there. You can't tell what I'm talking about. It's that black rim of stuff right there. So I got to try to dig that stuff out of there. I might soak it a little bit. It'll help. And let's try this section again. See if it'll budge. Yep, it budged. So there's the section. It's rather dull. It's ebonite. Let's put it over here, and we'll see what it looks like when it's polished up over here. And there's the feed, and we'll polish up this part right here, the visible part, and we'll show it all polished up over here. And there's our nib. And there is a date code there, and the date code just says 9. So that's the fourth quarter, no dots, fourth quarter of 1939 for that nib. And we'll show it all polished up over here. And we'll get my tiny drill bit out from the land of the tiny tools. And get my magnifying eyeballs on, because we want to be very, very careful with this. Let's get in close. Just basically turned to dust. And I just want to get all of its remnants out and not destroy the post that's holding that brass and aluminum retainer together. So basically we want to have it so that the new pellet will go in there and stay in there. So I had to give it a try. So here's the retainer and here's the pellet. We'll put the pellet pusher on it just to make sure that it'll go in and stay there. Yep, seems to want to stay there. So now we can complete this diaphragm replacement by just trimming this diaphragm to size and then folding it back on itself over this little aluminum shelf right here. So next we have to trim the diaphragm to length. The Inky Nib pellet pusher has a really handy groove right there, just to trace that and cut it to that length. If you have a pellet pusher that doesn't have that groove, the dimension is 30.35 millimeters. So we're going to put some talc all over this diaphragm, make it slide properly, and put the pellet pusher all the way in until it's touching the pellet. And I'm just going to feel with my thumbnail where that groove is. It's right there. There we go. Just going to make a mark there with my thumbnail and snip it off. There we go. Put that back in. And it's still a little bit long. There we go. That's right on the mark. So now we've just got to roll it back on itself until it gets to that little shelf. Just going to clean off that edge. There's a little bit of debris there. Just a tiny bit of the old diaphragm still remaining on that edge. There we go. Get that cleaned up. And let's see how well we do with this. Get it started. There we go. Get that cuff started and then try to tease it down the length. And once it gets to that point, it doesn't really want to go anymore. So I always try to push it over itself, like a double it, and try to get that edge so it slides over and onto that aluminum bit. And this one is really wanting to be a pain. Okay, I'm getting it close. There, starting to get that close. You get that edge right on that aluminum bit. Then you can hold that bit and push there, and push the pump through, and it unfolds on itself. Still, I'm going to drop a little bit more talc in there so it doesn't stick to itself. There we go. Finally, I got it not to stick to itself. There, that's the way it should look. It should move in and out like that. Like that, right there. There you can see the modern red plastic pellet in the new diaphragm. And now we just have to go get the barrel and clean it up. Okay, so maybe you can see that gray-brown stuff right there. That's the remnants of the old diaphragm stuck to where it was pressed against the barrel from the pump. So we got to get that out of there. You can see it on the inside there. So I'm going to scrape that out with a dental scraper. So I'm going to go at this for several minutes to get all that cleaned up. Okay, that's looking a lot better. Got most of that gack out of there. Now I can put the pump back in the barrel. Okay, so what we need to do is put some silicone oil around the end of that cuff so it doesn't bind on the inside of the barrel. So just a little dab will do ya. There we go. And I'm just going to sort of twist back and forth to make sure that that end goes right into the barrel. There we go. So it's not kinking at all on the inside of there. And it's the pressure of that ramp of aluminum against that diaphragm inside the barrel that seals this whole end of the pen. Just turn it for a couple of threads and add some silicone oil to those threads as well. Then add the collet, clamp that down, and just run it back and forth a little bit. Get that oil working. We want it to slide nice and smoothly, no friction whatsoever, so we don't crack that celluloid, because it is very old. And there we go. We just make it hand tight, just like that. Release the end of the collet, and that seems to be working properly. Get our light out here and you can see it working properly inside. Let's get up close and see whether you can see it without the inspection camera. So that creates the pressure. It expels air and sucks in ink, and expels air and sucks in ink. Works nicely. And the reason I put the pump back on the barrel, so I can put the blind cap on it so I can polish that barrel up. But before we do any polishing, I'm going to polish up that section, feed and nib, and put that back together again, put it in the barrel, and do a dip test, writing test, to make sure that the nib writes correctly. So here's the nib all polished up. Looks a far cry from what it used to. Back when I first looked at the pen, it was covered in old dirty ink, and tarnished, and now it looks like it was made just today. Both sides, beautiful. And there's the section, ebonite, looking gorgeous, shiny. And there's the feed, all gorgeous and shiny. Now we got to put these three together again and put it back in the barrel so we can do a dip test on that nib. So I reset the nib and the feed into the section. I put the section in the barrel for stability. Then I heated the section a little bit and sanded down the end of the ebonite feed just to get a little bit of ebonite dust for lubricant. Then pushed the nib and the feed together with a rubber mat and slid it into the section to the just about where it was before. It was just a little bit of space under that US. You couldn't see the 9 in there, and the end of the feed extended about 2.5 to 3 millimeters. And you can see a little bit of that ebonite dust that I sanded the end of that feed so it would slide properly. And I'm just going to put the breather tube back in for safekeeping. We don't need that for a dip test. And I put a little silicone grease on those threads as well. And then I checked to make sure that the tines were aligned properly. They were slightly off, so I bent them a little bit with my nib pliers from Pen Tooling just to get them aligned properly. So you can see they're nicely aligned. So let's get out some paper and do a dip test. And get out some Watermans and just dip that nib and feed into the ink and see what we have. 1940 Parker Duofold DuoVac. It's very, very wet. And there's feedback bordering on scratch. So a bit of polishing on that nib, I think, with some micro mesh. Let's see what kind of bounce we get out of this. Wow. Oh, it's very nice. Look at that. Let's close up on that bounce. That's really nice. So I'm going to do some figure eights on some micro mesh. Probably start with some 8,000 grit and then go to 12,000 grit and see if I can polish out some of that feedback. Okay, that's much smoother. Yeah, much. So I polished out a lot of that feedback. So now I can remove the section, put that away for safekeeping, and then polish up this barrel with some micro mesh, and then polish up the cap. But I need to get that top jewel off, to get that clip off, to be able to polish that up separately. So I added a little bit of heat, and that top jewel came right off, and there it is. It's one with all of the threads are plastic, and there's a separate cap seal right there. So this is different than the usual Parker Vacumatic cap. And there's the 2-part cap seal on the inside. So I'm going to put that in some pen flush and clean that up. So that's the piece that the top jewel threads go into right there. So we'll clean up all of these parts, and then we can polish up the barrel, put it up here, and we can polish up the clip. Let's put it over here on the left side. There's the clip unpolished, and we'll see what it looks like on the other side. And here we are with the barrel all polished up. You see that Anne's name is still there, parts of it anyway. The paint on the inside is completely gone, but that's okay. It makes the name a little bit more subtle, and all of the scratches are out of it. I find it interesting that the imprints are faded in the center. They're strong on the ends, so that D in Duofold and the P in Parker are very sharp, but you see the D and U and O of the Duofold is worn, and the same thing with the inside, just the E of Anne's name, because that's where your thumb goes most of the time, and so I think that's where it gets most of the wear. I also polished up the brass top of the filler pump, but we didn't want to get any polish or anything on that, because already some of the paint is off the top of the P there, so I didn't want to lose any more of that printing there. But it's looking very, very nice. Let's put it together with the cap, which hasn't been done yet, and you can see quite a stark difference between the two. And that stacked celluloid in the shadow wave striped pattern looks just gorgeous. The brilliance and the pearlescence comes right out. So the next thing on the agenda is to polish up that cap, and we'll see it match the barrel. So here is the cap all polished up. I went over it with some 400 grit to start, and then went down through the micro mesh one by one until I got to 4,000. That's when I took the masking tape off and polished from 4,000 to 12,000 with the micro mesh on those rings as well, and got them all nice and shiny. And then I finished off with my Dremel tool buffer and some polishing compound and got a really nice shine. And there's the pen complete. All we have to do is put the cap back together again with the clip and the jewel and the cap seal. So this is the part that the top jewel screws into, and that's got to be down at the end. This is different than most Vacumatic caps and clips on caps that I've seen. So I'm going to get a rod here, just slide it through just to guide it into place, make sure it's the right way up, and I'm going to put a pencil in there just to hold it in place while I place the clip on the end of the cap, and we screw that thread in. A little rubber matting to tighten it down a little bit and make sure we're placed between the two breather holes, and that's nice and tight. And then we put the cap sealer down in there and give it a push, and it kind of clicks into place there. A little groove in there that clicks in. Make that nice and tight. And then I'm going to give that end jewel a little bit of polish as well. And there we go. The top jewel is all nice and shiny. And then we just have to assemble the pen and drop a little bit of silicone oil on those threads, both to seal them and to make them run smooth. There we go. And there's our bright, beautiful pen all shined up. Now we just have to fill it. And we turn on the weigh scale, and we're going to fill up the pen. I'm getting smart. I'm just leaving the blind cap on there now. So this weighs 7.9 grams empty. And we get out some Watermans. And to follow the instructions, it says to fill, pump 9 times, pause between strokes. So I'm going to go stroke, stroke, stroke. Yeah, that 9th time, I didn't hear any more bubbles. So you got all the air out of the system. And let's put it back on the scale. And we got 9 grams. That makes no sense whatsoever. I'm going to do that again. Let's empty the pen. It was 7.9 grams to start. Empty. There, I've emptied the pen. And now it weighs slightly more, just slightly more, because a little bit of ink in there. 8 grams. Press tear. Maybe I didn't press tear correctly. And we'll do the whole thing again. And we'll try it again. That's more like it. 1.2 milliliters of ink. This is a relatively smaller pen. With some Vacumatics, I'm getting 1.5 milliliters of ink, but that's 1.2, and that's normal. Put the blind cap back on, and we're ready to write. And we get out some Clairefontaine, post our pen, and again, 1940, Parker Duofold DuoVac with a 14 karat gold fine nib, and it's very, very wet, and it's luxuriously smooth now. Let's check our line widths. No pressure whatsoever. No pressure. Add a little bit of bounce, and we'll measure those lines with my pad from Dominant Industries. Horizontal line is like a 0.4. The vertical line here is a 0.5. There it is again. Yeah, 0.5. And let's see, the bouncy line is a little bit fatter than a 0.7, almost an 8. So you have 0.4 to 0.5 millimeters on the horizontals and the verticals, and then with the bounce we're getting almost 0.8 millimeters. So that is a fine nib. I'd say that was successful. It looks and writes almost the same as when Anne received it when she was 18 years old in 1940. Again, that's my guess. And I'll be back with my thoughts about this resurrection. So what are my thoughts about this pen resurrection? Well, I'm especially pleased with this resurrection for 3 reasons. First, I had no major issues with this pen. The Vac Pump came out easily, the nib was in great shape, and the clip was removed with no gnashing of teeth or under-the-breath cursing. Second, this is one of those old pens that looked awful when I bought it, but shone up like brand new with some careful polishing. The nib transformation couldn't have been more black and white, or should I say black and gold. And finally, the personalization of this pen makes it even more special. Actually finding someone who matches the time and location of this pen when it was new imbues the pen with some special meaning. Pens are very personal items, or at least they used to be. When this pen was made in 1940, a fountain pen was a special gift for special occasions like birthdays, Christmas, weddings, or graduations. This pen retailed for $5.95 in 1940, which equates to around $138 US today. It was a substantial gift. I can totally see this pen being presented to the 18-year-old Anne Gleckner as she graduated high school or entered Williamsport Junior College in 1940 to study home economics. And here it is 85 years later, looking and working like it did in 1940. If you're interested in purchasing this beautiful striped DuoVac, just email me at inkquiringminds@gmail.com with your name and your address, and I'll get you a shipping quote, along with instructions on how to pay my PayPal $170 US. And there you have it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that bell to get instant notifications whenever a new video is posted. And you can join as a member of my channel for only 99 cents a month, and I guarantee I'll answer your comments in the comment section, and you'll get cool emojis, badges, sneak peek unboxing videos, as well as instant access to my videos the moment I post them. And that just leaves it for me to say thank you for watching, and that's all she wrote.
I made this.